Now, going on to the business blunder of the day, we have the United Auto Workers, where they're going up against the big three, and the debate is heating up. Also, a slight alteration of my last statement with the UAW from a previous episode. Now, going into the details of that, a couple weeks ago, or rather last week, I noted that the United Auto Workers, which is the union for the automotive industry, which is precipitously or mainly used by the big three. When you look at the big three, it used to be the pinnacle of automotive technology and people was Chrysler, General Motors, and Ford. The big three all used to be headquartered in Detroit. GM is still headquartered in Detroit. You still have Ford technically headquartered over in, what was the hills? It's actually a suburb, but of course they have operations downtown. I digress. It used to be the pinnacle. Actually, it used to be the most richest, successful cities in the world until they had the cultural demise and business demise. But I digress. During the show, I said the UAW didn't give enough concessions during the 2008 bankruptcies, which they did give some. So that's why I need the qualifications. They did have some concessions. Now, when I was speaking with someone, again, this is anecdotal evidence from a commentator, they noted that from their experience, they said the cost of living, and this is from them, quote, the cost of living currently, this fight inflation, we know what inflation is looking at with these days. So apparently they gave up a cost of living adjustment. They also claim that pensions, no workers hired after 2007s will have pensions, period. That statement I'm a little confused about because in the latest draft between the UAW and the specific automotive group Stellantis, they're talking about altering the pensions. So I need more clarification. Let me know in the comments, but it sounds like some of them might still have it. And then he said, another comment was 3, the UAW allowed workers to be hired at lower wages, which it just sounds like diet communism. We're going to allow you to hire people at lower rates. Why not just hire the best for the business or the best for the market? Well, no, you must use the union. So I do apologize for I didn't take those comments into, or I spoke in absolutes, and apparently only the Siths speak in absolutes is what I'm told. I'm a big fan of Star Trek. I'm just kidding. I know it's Lord of the Rings, but I digress. Calm down. I know it's the Wookiees in Star Wars. Now, with this recent one, you have Chrysler's parent company Stellantis, which they bought out most of the companies in Europe and automotive companies, and they actually really went against the demands of the previous offer when they were going back with the UAW. So this is Chrysler, their owner, talking about the UAW. They're basically saying they're unrealistic, which let's dive in and see what specific points are they saying the unions are unrealistic on. I'll pull this up and I apologize here. So, yeah, this is you have Chrysler's parent company sharply criticizing, again, some Reuters, and they actually said that UAW needs to, quote, a focus on reality from everyone involved. So this is Stellantis North American Chief Operating Officer Mark Stewart. He said in a letter to their employees that the automaker is, quote, committed to working with the UAW to reach an agreement based on economic realism, unquote. Now, he is dancing with the devil because if they go on strike, it's kind of like the mob, well, union. If they go on strike, their revenues precipitously drop, of course, because they're not making as much. And although they're transitioning to EVs and robots, which will subsequently decrease the amount needed from the unions in terms of headcount, they're still very much forced to be dependent on that labor group. Now, it looks like Stewart actually added, saying that, quote, demands could endanger our ability to make decisions in the future that provide job security for our employees. This is a losing proposition for all of us. Now, it is also, unquote, it's important to note that the 4-year contract agreements are currently ongoing with Stellantis, which again owns Chrysler in the United States, also Dodge and Jeep, all its properties and brands. It's also going on with General Motors and Ford. And they're set to expire September 14th, which sounds far, but when it comes to these contract negotiations, it's going to be here before we know it. I was going to say, probably not a prudent time to buy or sell their stock, although I'm not a financial analyst or I'm not giving financial advice. But there's a lot of uncertainty right now. Now, in terms of the specifics, he noted that the UAW is seeking, quote, audacious and ambitious improvements, including pay raises of more than 40% over 4 years, significant time off, and a restoration of all of defined benefit pensions previously eliminated for newer workers. Now, of course, you have Fain saying, and again, Fain is the leader of the UAW, saying, quote, Stellantis proposals are a slap in the face. And he actually threw their offer into the dustbin. Oh, trash bin if you're American. They're European over in Stellantis, though. And Yeah, 40%. That's a pretty darn big increase. Now, it looks like the UAW is also saying that the company opposes the end to their two-tier wages, and that is a practice of hiring newer hires getting paid much less than veteran workers, which, again, merit versus tenure. Imagine having to hire someone and right off the bat pay them 150 an hour. That's ridiculous. And again, going back to my not editing, but clarification of my previous episode when I talked about UAW, where I noted that figure of one of the reasons they went bankrupt in 2008 with General Motors specifically, they were paying someone $65 an hour to put a tire on a car. And a comment said, well, yes, that includes benefits, so your health care, your dental. That's true, but to the business and the shareholders, it's still costing $65 an hour. It doesn't matter if they're paying, $35 for the base salary and the remaining amount for dental or health care. At the end of the day, it's still costing a lot of money, especially compared to the competition, which doesn't have that. Now, it looks like two people briefed on the matter told Reuters that this week's automakers have estimated the UAW's contract demands could raise the current mid-$60 per hour rate to more than $150 per hour. Keep in mind, that does include benefits such as dental, healthcare, what have you. That's not globally compatible anymore. There was a time when GM was the best car company in the world. They sold the most cars in the world. They had great pieces of automotive machinery. They were making so much money. And I've had family in the UAW, in GM management, where you hear stories where they were taken care of for life. Almost like a gang. Like, if you work there for enough years, your healthcare, your retirement, your pensions, you're set for life. They could afford that when they had the profits. That's not happening anymore. Now, the UAW is saying, well, they're making a lot of profits these days. They should be giving them all to us or sharing a bunch with us. Well, no, because that's what we call short term. These businesses, because they're being coerced by the government, they're going EV. Electric vehicles are the future for them, regardless of the impact on the environment. Just look up a lithium-ion mining area, and you'll see, oh, dear God, all those chemicals. Wait a minute, this car's only going to last 5-10 years. It's disposable? But I digress. They seem green, and politically, people are winning political points by pushing the agenda. But in order to reinvest in the EV technologies, they have to have they need these profits not only to actually put up the new facilities to manufacture them, but with this economic uncertainty, companies are starting to wonder, how much money do we need in the bank to venture the dark times when people don't buy stuff as much? The only reason Ford did not go bankrupt during the 2008 recession because they took out a loan and had cash in the bank right before the economy went to hell. So they had, I don't know, some companies call it a war fund or a war chest or a cash reserve, but it's one of those issues where the competition has lower prices, better products. How are they going to get to the future? And the UAW is also worried how many jobs are going to be left, because EVs, by their very nature, they need less work to make it. There's less components, frankly. If you just look at the number of components that go into manufacturing the product. So the UAW is feeling the pressure on both fronts. They're going to have less jobs because EVs have less jobs in general. And there's going to be less low-skill jobs as well because there's going to be a lot of software engineering needs. So people need to be retrained, retooled. But there's a lot of uncertainty. And again, the competition, they don't have these issues. Toyota makes the most reliable cars on the planet. Honda, one of the most reliable cars on the planet. My parents still drive a 2001 Honda Accord. It still works because it's an internal combustion engine, has the best technology in terms of reliability at the time, and I would argue to this day. It's got over 100,000 miles, still running strong. You don't get that with EVs with the current technology. We might in the future with battery developments, technology very fast moving. But Toyota, no union. Honda, no union. Tesla, no union. They increase the cost of goods sold. I understand the inception of they always say the good intentions theory. We all know the road to hell is paved with. But there was a time in the United States where unions were needed. And they did accomplish some great things back in the day. But right now, this is a pivot point in the automotive community and the automotive industry. These companies are struggling to adapt. And they're going all in. So if they're wrong, they're going to go bankrupt. And in this move, they're going to need more money than they could ever possibly fathom. You talk to Mary Barra or you listen to her interviews, the current CEO of General Motors, And I reference that point because I've done more research on that company than the others, just because I used to be an avid fan of what they used to make. Or the good old Camaro and the Corvette having a stick shift and big V8s. But I digress on the reasons. Mary Barra wants the Cadillac brand to be fully electric by 2030. She wants the whole fleet, in terms of every GM, which includes Buick, Cadillac, Chevy, GMC, all of them to be EV by 2035. Sounds like a long time away. It's really not. Especially when you have to set up these factories that are huge. If you want to compete with Tesla, that means you need to develop more technology similar to the Gigapress, which is a giant press the size of a couple of Volkswagens that, as it sounds, just presses out massive pieces of the vehicle. There's a huge upfront cost. You also need to pay to train people to use those new technologies. And there's a lot of speculation how many of these companies are going to make it. So they have profits today, but again, they need to reinvest them, which I think is something that some people don't look at the other side of the aisle sometimes. And this is a concept in main, not just, automotive companies, but relationships, business. You always want to look at all these sides of the equation. So I understand the UAW side, what they're fighting for. I just don't think business-wise it's going to be competitive right now, especially. The competition is fierce, and it's only getting more intense as these businesses continue to transition to new products, new developments. And the big elephant in the room no one is bringing up is China. Their EV technology is really catching up. They will get to the point where they can import into the United States with ease. With the low cost of labor in China, that's going to flood the market and change everything. That's going to be a huge market disruption. It's taking China damn near a decade to catch up in terms of developing their own EV technology made in China with Chinese companies, but they're really starting to catch up. And even Elon is bringing this to the forefront and talking about how that's going to be a future upcoming business threat in terms of looking at the landscape of what competition and what brands are growing and what they're going to be competing against in the future. But in terms of the business blunder, I would say the long-term business blunder, again, is not having the right relationship with your employees where they feel like they were not taken care of properly. When employees feel like they're being taken care of properly, they're part of the team, they're invested in the company, there's no need to have a union, in my opinion, or to have a third party that's going to basically act as a divorce attorney where you've heard the horror stories where that divorce attorney, they're not going to work to bring the people together or have an amicable ending. They're going to bleed you dry physically and emotionally, I would argue. But I see a lot of parallels with unions as well. They're driving a wedge between the two parties because that person, that third party, they benefit because of that conflict. And that's where they profit. Also, the UAW benefit donates more to politicians than you could possibly imagine, too. So in terms of why I'm more critical of them is instead of giving more money back to the individuals, the frontline employees, the guys who are working a wrench on the front line, they're giving it to politicians down the street or in Washington, D.C. Now, granted, you can also argue the moral vacuousness of having the public sector give each other contracts in which, the teachers union, they just donated more money than possible to presidential nominees and other politicians, but that politician would turn around and they just passed a law to increase their wages by 20, 30, 50%. So that's a little bit of the darkness that no one really talks about as well when it comes to public sector and all those types of interactions. But again, as these businesses are continuing to struggle in the automotive community and the competition is getting better, cheaper, stronger, to have this huge threat of having a strike, as well as the cost of goods, the cost to manufacture, the actual labor cost almost doubling. And I understand that might include benefits and dental and all that, as well as the hourly wage, but to the shareholders and to the people buying the car, that cost is still into the vehicle and increasing the cost of goods sold. And in a world where it's going to be becoming more and more price conscientious, it'll be interesting to see, but in terms of business blunder, that certainly has to be the business blunder of the day. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time to tune in today. Again, we're trying to get to 3,000 subscribers by the end of August, so you can click that button. I would greatly appreciate it. Also, don't forget to tell your family, tell your friends, tell your coworkers, heck, tell your enemies, tell anyone and everyone. Just stay safe and fight the good fight.